So, as a pre-warning, I have fixed the problem that you may have noticed if you watched the video for the Warcraft log session that we did previously. And you can now hear other people talking in Discord if we have a conversation. So, as I mentioned as a warning earlier, please do not, if you value this, please do not say anything you wouldn't want posted on an unlisted YouTube channel that nobody watches other than links here in Discord. So with that warning out of the way, I'm hoping everybody can see my stream and see my warlock flying around Sunny Borealis. And we can start talking about interface and add-ons. So as a quick rundown, I'm going to talk a little bit about the science and philosophy of building an interface. I'm going to talk about 3 sets of add-ons that are part of our sort of team mandatory add-on setup. So the first is obviously boss mods, DBM, and bigwigs. The second is going to be exorcist raid tools, and the third is going to be weak auras. I'm going to try and limit this to about an hour session because I don't want to talk for like 2 hours and run out my voice. Although you could easily do that on just weak auras alone. And then at the end of that, I'm going to do some sort of runs on the dummy so you can see everything that I've set up in action and talk about some of those principles again with some examples and just go from there. And hopefully people are interested. People find the content interesting and add to the discussion and teach me some stuff while we're at it. So, there is... I'm going to start that off with the interface is important because there is a resource in the World of Warcraft that is absolutely critical. No boss has been killed without it, and it occurs on every player, every character, and managing it is one of the largest things you can do to increase your level of success as a raider. Does anybody know what resource I am talking about?
Your health.
Attention, exactly. Human attention is a resource as real as mana, health, soul shards, whatever you want to do. Managing it and directing it with your user interface is how you raise and maintain your awareness of abilities and boss encounters, and how you, in short, how you win boss encounters, because 99% of the time, when a mechanic is screwed up that results in deaths and in harder content wipes, it is being surprised by or unprepared for something that you knew was going to happen and just wasn't at the front of your attention that caused that to happen. So, one of the greatest facts to help people understand the importance I learned in driving school, and that is that peak human visual acuity, visual precision, occurs in an area the size of a dime held at arm's length. So imagine for a second, and we're no longer in Sunny Borealis, imagine for a second that you have a dime in your hand and hold it out at arm's length, and just hold that in front of your screen and realize how small. Most of you are probably in a situation where arm's length gets you to your screen or close to it. So imagine a window on your screen the size of the dime, and that is the only thing you can see at 100%. So that is the locus of your attention when you look at your screen. So because of that small area, it's very easy to tell that on a typical screen, you are going to need to scan around to find the important things, the animations for abilities, your rotational information, what have you. And there are going to be delays in that scan because you can't look at the whole screen with that level of detail at once. Your best vision is very limited, and you'll miss details that are critical outside of that. And what that means is you have to have your interface set up in an efficient manner that you can very quickly get all the information you need at a given point in a raid encounter or in a mythic dungeon or whatever piece you're doing, you can do a sweep and get all the information you need at a glance very quickly so that you can react in the level of time that things are going to require you to react. Because if you were to sort of scan individually with that dime various parts of your screen, you would come up with a very long period of time, 20, 30, 40 seconds, to really go around and take a good look at everything. And obviously, if you take 20 seconds to gather all that information in a raid encounter, you've probably missed 5 or 6 mechanics going by. Which means you've probably missed things you need to react to, and have wiped the raid in any reasonable difficulty content. So this is kind of the basis for saying your user interface is critical because you need to get potentially very large amounts of information visually very fast. So if you look at how my screen is set up, there's some obvious pieces of information. There's obviously my health bar down at the bottom. If I target myself, you can see the target bar. If I get off this mount, you'll get my health pet bar, or my pet's health bar, sorry. My pet action bars, I've got some action bars, and I've got some weak auras set up in the middle for rotational information. If I go down, you can see some cast bars there as I get back on my mount. If I go down for the dummies for a second, and we start some DPS, you can see some other weak auras pop up. You can see some damage information over here. You can see some relevant debuff information coming over here. And you'll get a feel for where things are. So the user interface is by necessity very personal. What works for me is not going to be immediately and instantaneously what works for you, or anyone else. And so organizing it is a very important part of your task. And there's a lot of add-ons out there that will help you do that. Some of the common ones that people use, so unit frame add-ons, I'm using LVUI. Some people you either really like or really hate LVUI in my experience, but you have LVUI has allowed me to use move the unit frames around, change the shape of them, to sort of condense that information. So I've moved my health bar, my target bar, and my target bar down here, because it's a semi-important piece of information. I need to know how much health I have and whether I'm in danger of dying. I need to know who I'm targeting, and as a tank more so than a DPS, I need to know who my target is targeting, but that's also very helpful information, so I keep it there across my various unit frames. So that's a piece of a set of information that I've determined is of a level of importance that it needs to be around where my visual scan is. So one thing you'll notice, or may have noticed, what area has no UI elements at all in my user interface here?
The middle.
That's right, my character's feet. The place where the animations for everything important that I need to dodge is sitting is free of UI elements. So I've done that specifically so that I don't have UI elements obstructing any sort of in-game visuals that are incoming that are going to be important for me. So just to go back and demonstrate that, when we start up here on the dummy, I have my rotational information down here. I've got damage coming in here. I've got buffs and debuffs coming over here. But this part around my character is clear. So if something lands at my feet, I'm not blocking it. And that's the center point for my visual scan, is my character's feet. That's the rest point that I'm always coming back to when I'm looking around my screen for various and gathering information. Very close to that, I have this set of weak auras for critical rotational elements. So you can see dots on target in the center. You can see haunt off to the right as I'm casting now in the debuff. You can see unstable affliction, larger cooldowns, trinket, interrupt, stun, stuff that I need to very quickly gather. I've placed down here very close to the start point of my visual, or the rest point of my visual scan, so I have that information quickly, because I'm going to have to refer to that a lot. If I get a proc that I need to react to do maximum damage, my soul shard counter down here to understand if I'm going to cap, and the dots that sort of outline my damage windows under a Malefic Rapture stuff. So these are not, like, these weak auras are not mine. They're actually Luxos weak auras for Shadowlands. I do get in and modify those over the course of a tier, but these are pretty much the stock ones for Warlock right now. I like them because they're nice and compact, and I'm not into the Lua side of weak aura building a whole lot to make them do special stuff. But I will get in and personalize those as I get to using them. So there are a lot of packages out there. It's not bad to use pre-canned ones. You're not particularly better off making your own. But they are something you want to probably be able to tweak, because they're a key information element. The other thing that I haven't done yet is prune in this group. One of the largest things I'll do over the course of expansion is when I get some of the muscle memory down, I'm going to prune information that I don't need from this area, because this is my critical information area. I want it to be with as least cluttered as possible. So the next thing we're going to come up with is boss mods. This is kind of the first set of add-ons we're going to talk about, because what you didn't see there for UI elements are boss mod items. So these are the big wink ones. So there's a rangefinder, there's messages, timer bars, emphasized timer bars, alternate power, and then countdowns, emphasized messages. So you see again, I've got these arrayed around my character's feet so I can pull the information from them. So if we go to the general chat for just a second, I'm going to ask everybody on the count of 3 to type in general chat what your preferred boss mod add-on is. Which boss mod add-on do you use? So I'm going to get you to do that in 3, 2, 1. La Vendetta is one I haven't heard before. All right, I see one person has the same answer as me. Any guesses as to who that person is? Bubble. That's right. I use DBM and bigwigs because they're different and they do different things, and you can take the best of both worlds. Nobody stops you from using both, using all. But the important part about running both that not a lot of people do is spend a lot of time configuring their boss mods. So boss mods have tons of widgets, interesting little pieces of code that their authors have programmed and are very proud of. And so they like to turn them all on all the time immediately. So the default for everything. So this is my Rathian config that I'm not going to need anymore because I could do Rathian in my sleep at this point. But you'll see I have a few things checked. But if I hit load default options, bam, everything is turned on. Every single goddamn thing is turned on, and that's cluttered as hell. So one of the first things I do when going into a new raid encounter in the early stages of progression is I go the hell in here and I find the boss we're on and I turn all the goddamn things off. And then I go pull the boss and die to something. And I go turn on the warning for that thing. And I pull the boss and I die to something else and I go turn on the warning for that thing because I need it. Right? because I say through experience it would help me to know when that's coming. And obviously I start off with a knowledge of the encounter, and I say I think I would need to know this. So I go into my DBM and I say, okay, we're turning all of this off. That's no good, blah, yada, 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 yada. Don't want any of that. But I know one of the key mechanics I'm going to have to respond to is incineration. So I'm going to turn on the warning for incineration, so I know to get the hell out. Maybe I'll turn on announce incineration targets, because I think that's important. I'm not going to announce searing armor targets, because not standing in front of the boss is a pretty easy one to internalize. I'm not going to use this nameplate widget for hardened core, because I know if it shows a health bar on my nameplates I can DPS it. I'm not going to show the timer for Gale Blast, because it's a very obvious animation, but maybe I will show the range frame for Gale Blast, because I want to see the exact range of that coming in, so that I can minimize my movement, because obviously if you've done Rathian Mythic, you know minimizing your movement is the name of the game. Similarly, for the Mythic stuff, probably want to see a stack counter for Burning Madness, which is the movement. Maybe I want to see icons, and I have icon control. So I'll go through and I'll pick a few of these that I think are good to start up, and I'll close that. And then we'll do some pulls, and I'll identify some problems, and I'll make some changes. But the important thing that not a lot of people do with their boss mods is go in and configure them. I very strongly recommend everybody takes that process of go in to the default config, turn all the shit off, then turn on specifically the things you think are important to be aware of, and see how that goes. And evolve. You should be opening your boss mod screen. You should be opening your boss mod screen 3 and 4 times a night to make adjustments. And some people go entire tiers without touching it. And those defaults are very spammy. They're very busy on screen, and they can distract you from actually seeing what the mechanics look like. They can distract you from optimizing your rotation, being aware of audibles that are getting called. They can take your attention away from the things that matter if you don't go in and prune them down to the warnings you need. The other thing that people don't realize is you can get really granular with the widgets in these. So if we look at the the Bigwigs equivalent of Rathion, which I haven't gone in and configured for this because I did a UI reset a couple of weeks ago. But if I go in here and I look at incineration, I can do a lot of sort of weak aura level stuff for this. I can assign a sound to it. I can add colors to the displays. We can change the bar location, countdown, emphasize only me. We can create messages for it. There's a ton of stuff that we can do to personalize how this boss mod shows its incineration warning. And we can do that for other things too. And I can't understate how much it improves play by going in and personalizing these and thinking between wipes about how you set these up to give you the warning you need. Certain things grab our attention much easier than others. So sound is a big one in here. Sound has a higher response time in the human brain, or a faster response time, a higher level of criticality in the human brain than visual warnings do. If you jump when you hear a sudden sound, that's because you're hardwired as a human being to react to sound cues. So we can use that for the really deadly abilities that are going to require the fastest reaction and say, we're going to put a sound against this. There are a ton of them. We got air horns. We've got Big Yankee Devil. I have no idea what that sound does. There's a ton of sounds in here that we can use to prioritize aggro. So a ton of sound files are included with this. We have the ability to change the size and sort of forcefulness of the visual warnings if we want to do it. We can get really deep into that. There's a certain amount where it becomes like you could spend days, making them cosmetically exactly how you wanted, and that wouldn't give you a lot of value. But just going in and prioritizing them to the things you need to react fast to will give you a big edge, both in being aware and consistently meeting mechanics, and also handling divergence from your encounter routine. All right, I'm being told I'm lagging pretty bad and people can't see what I'm doing real well. Is that true?
It's kind of slow, yeah.
Okay, I apologize for that. I think we're going to kind of have to live with it because it's likely just a bandwidth thing from where I am to where the Discord server is. But
What do you have your stream set at?
Let me turn off the anchors here. Okay. See if we can improve this any. Oh, I don't want to do that. Thank you very much. I gotta lower the resolution and just see if that picks up the performance a little bit. I don't know if I have to turn that off and back on, so I'm going to do that really quickly.
Set the FPS as high as you can.
That's already done. All right. Hopefully, we'll see if that's any better. All right, now where was I? So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about boss mods. Configuring boss mods to reduce the spamminess is just something that people don't pick up immediately. It's one of the things that can make a huge difference that people just don't do. There's all kinds of add-ons there, or there's all kinds of options in those boss mods, and basically the only wrong answer is to leave a default and not do anything with it. As I mentioned, UIs tend to be very personal. What works for you as a warning probably isn't the same thing that works best for somebody else, and there's a certain feeling out process to it. So to make that optimal for you, you have to get in there and play with it. So the next add-on I'm going to talk about is raid tools, Exorcist raid tools. So I like to refer to this as the Santa Claus add-on because it serves two distinct functions. One is to give you nice goodies that you can use to your advantage, and the other is to tell other people if you've been naughty. So there's all kinds of raid nanny things in here. So the primary thing that we use XRT for is the notes. And I apologize, I'm getting some keyboard feedback. Somebody's got a live mic. I think that is you, gal. So the primary thing that we use XRT for in raid is notes. So you're going to see some old healer cooldown timing thing. You have to go into the raid tools. It's /RT or / I think XRT works too. And enable notes, and you can receive notes from the leadership that have interesting information that's pertinent to the raid encounter. So that's the first bit. We generally do assignments through this and broadcast them to people when we have a particular job for people. So this is good to have on. You can turn it off when you don't want to see a big black blob, but you can change the notes. We can make this click through by hitting lock. So now I'm not going to accidentally try to click over here and resize the thing. but you can drag it around and put it where you want. And I tend to leave it quite small most of the time unless I have to refer to the assignments. So that is the notes. That's the primary thing why this is listed on as required for our raid, is because that's how we do some of our delegation. Raid cooldowns is a huge list of spells that you can see how the raid has. So this is useful for raid leaders to know when the big cooldowns are. So these are mostly defensive raid cooldowns, or a mastery, rallying cry, things like that. Major raid, those are kind of the ones. Single target healing cooldowns, resurrection cooldowns, raid movement cooldowns. Interrupts are a good one to track for some bosses. Various utility pieces, AoE CC. There's an endless list of things that you can track here. Mostly that's in the raid leader space. They want to know when certain things are up, so if they have to do an audible and call for something to get used, they know who has it. But it's also useful for cheating on your DPS homework. So let's say I am a junior warlock and I'm not terribly sure what I'm doing, but I'm getting blown out on the meters by this other warlock in the raid, and I want to know what he's doing, so I'm going to take his major cooldowns and enable them, and then I'm going to see when he is using those, and if I'm paying attention or if I'm recording the screen so I can get that information, then maybe I'm going to get something useful in terms of knowledge about how one of my peers is doing the encounter that's going to help me do more DPS or be better at things. So that's something that raid cooldowns can be used for, that's sort of on a personal and not raid level. The interrupts can be very useful when there's an interrupt. If you need to call, if you need to audible because you use your interrupt at the wrong time, it's not going to be ready for one you're assigned to. You can see at a glance, if we go to interrupts and we enable these, we can see at a glance. So spell lock, oops. Why are you not showing my, do I not have my pet out? Anyway, I guess it doesn't show mine on these, perhaps.
You have to lock it at the top right.
Nope, that just changed the window. Anyway, maybe it's just not showing mine for that one, but interrupts is a good one because you can then call at somebody who has an interrupt available. All right, that's pretty blurry. Let me turn the resolution.
Go back to your interrupt screen.
Sure.
I think you had it set as a column that's not visible. Yeah,
okay.
where it says column, if it's in column 4 or 5, you're not going to see it.
That's a good call. So there's my interrupt. Spell lock from good old Fellhunter. I am going to turn the resolution back up because hopefully that will help people.
Yeah, it was completely not visible. Like, it was just a big blur of cubes.
All right. Try it at a little higher resolution so everybody gets a good view. I'm recording directly off my WoW screen for the YouTube video, so that should have a higher resolution and less of the choppiness issues if people want to go back and look at it. But we will try to make it, viewable. So raid cooldowns in RT, interrupts you can track, and what that lets you do is call somebody who has an active interrupt to take your place. For example, visual note is a really cool one. So this is an ability to create notes out of images that can be shared. And it's preloaded with maps from various dungeons. And you can put icons on them. You see I just put some red blob down on that one. So this is one I prepared for Sludge Fist in Castle Nathrion Mythic. which is the boss research that I was doing with Viragosa. So this is a note that can be shared in the game so everybody can see what we're talking about. So if we play with that, let's make a new note here so we can sort of see the process. I'm going to go to Nilotha.
Really quick, could you try clicking the live session button once you get one in? I just want to see if this is something we could potentially broadcast to the raid in the event that you want to go through the fight really quick before we actually start. Like there's a live session button on the Exorcist raid tools.
Yep.
Like would that generate like a chat link for us to join with?
So what it's going to do is it's going to take, I believe it's going to take people in the raid group who have an equivalent version of Exorcist raid tools active and show them what I'm seeing. So we can send a clear image, but I believe that'll let you draw on the thing in real time and see people.
Gotcha. Kind of like Mythic Dungeon tools, right?
Yep, very similar to that.
Great, thanks.
So, just to give an example, so this is Vexiona's room. So when we were doing Vexiona pulls, we would have the boss parked here in front of the stairs. We'd have a very unhappy Blood Death Knight standing over here, backed up against the stairs, death striking for his life. We would have a certain holy Prot Paladin sitting over here with a large stack of adds on him, trying to tank around poorly dropped purple puddles. We'd have a small line of BM hunters trying to avoid anyone other than BM hunters getting sucked in. We'd have We'd have Trini running away over here with the purple thing, hoping not to get sucked in again. This would all be sabotaged by a big ad that sucks people in over here, meleeing a warlock who does too much aggro. That might be me. Then we'd have other things like Quarion sitting over here in Africa, baiting things to the wrong place, LOLing about how much range his mastery gives him. We'd have half of Major Chill's raid trying to DPS this boss and the attendance boss at the same time. It would be good times. We had a lot of fun with Vexiona. I totally didn't get burnt out on that boss at all. But you can set up all kinds of things. So if we go over here and we use our red text, we can put a big X saying don't be over here and bait the breath. And we can put, funny green arrows saying get your damn void puddles out of the raid over here. I can't draw, my paint skills are pretty terrible. That we'd be yelling about that, and then people would be said Death Knight to move the boss down here so we have more strength. I did the same thing bad again there with the arrow. It's all good. We can put text. Where can I type in my text here? Hey, get out with that purple shit, you noobs. There we go. All right. So yeah, we can do all kinds of things with the visual note and then send to people so that you have a visual context of what you're talking about, which is better than saying please follow the jumping paladin around and nobody can figure out what Iron's transmog is that week. So that's the visual note. That's really cool. Fight log. You can set this up to generate combat log that you can review locally. It's useful for most of the same reasons that details or other sort of in-game combat logging are. There's a little bit more you can dig into here. So if we go to deaths, and obviously there's no deaths because I was just damaging the dummy. If you go to deaths, there's a fairly good module here for figuring out what you took damage from. There's a lot of goodies to play with in here. I haven't used it much because it overlaps a lot with details, and it doesn't let me make jokes in my details nickname. So That's cool. And then we have the raid nanny stuff. So raid inspect is going to show everybody in your raid what you're doing. It doesn't like that I have an eye level 72 trinket that performs better than eye level 130s, and I kind of don't like that as well, but that is what it is. But it's going to say that's a low eye level item. It's going to tell me whether my shit is enchanted or not, whether it has gems. It's going to tell me what talents everybody is running, so I can be a nanny about that. It's going to tell me the PvP talents too, although that's not very useful for a raid tool set. It's going to tell me my stats, some achievements, Azurite powers, so we can go full nanny. This is going to show me in a drop down what I could be choosing in this row, as opposed to what I've actually chosen. So that's cool. It's tell me what my major and minor essence is in. This is all going to get updated to the Covenant stuff eventually. So this lets the raid leader look at everybody and what they're doing and call out the people who are doing things that aren't particularly good. So if we had people with low, like rank 1 and 2 essences in a progression mythic raid, we would tell them to GTFO and grind some stuff. If you had enough class knowledge, you could tell whether or not their Azurite powers were good. We have various checks we can do here. So check food. It's going to tell me who has food. So I don't have any food. I show up here. People with 5 stat food show up here. 10, 14. Obviously, these would have been higher when we were actually BFA. We can check the flasks. I do have a greater flask of Endless Fathoms still ticking away here, so I show up on the good side of that. I can send these reports to chat. I can post them only to myself. I can turn that off in LFR. I can do it on a ready check. We get all this nice raid nanny stuff to make sure everybody's doing everything that we expect them to. We have invite tools that I haven't used very much, but this allows you to auto-accept invites from friends and guild members, or I don't know if it works with communities. That'll be an interesting thing to check. It also gives invite keywords if you're starting the group, and you put invite by keywords in whatever, you can tell people, and this is used typically because EK is an extremely large guild with an extremely large membership, and it's hard to pick people out of the list who need to be in the raid, especially if you're thinking who's not here and trying to go through a list of 26 to 30 names and figure out what it is. So generally what you'll see is there'll be a spammer starting the raid who will post in guild/Greenwall to whisper a keyword for invite for Q team, and so the onus is on you if you want to get in that raid to whisper them and get yourself invited. Just helps us as sort of leadership organize and get the raid together faster. You could do group shuffling in raid for this. You can save your roster. You can apply groups, set the current roster. This is, I guess, less useful now than it would have been back a while, but there's definitely organizational stuff that can be used here. There's a mark bar, which is pretty cool. So if we turn this on and then we look here, we get the ability to set markers on things. So let's find an NPC. Yeah, you're Skull now, right? And we'll clear that. This has a ready check and pull functionality that you can configure, but we can figure out who's what pretty easily. This is an interesting piece of utility. There are some other like standalone add-ons. I think Magic Marker is one that's pretty good, that will let you do that and let you do the raid things. You could also macro these, but RT gives you that option. We can put descriptions on the marks. There's a tracker for battle reses that we can move around. Tells you in a raid encounter how many reses are available and what's the timer on the next one. Marks the backup raid lead castle. We can do timers, pull timer AFK. So you can macro these timers, particularly my timer, into your abilities. One of the things that will let you do that I've used extensively in the past as a tank is you can put a timer on the activation of your major cooldowns that broadcast to broadcasts to the raid, so they will see the timer and tells them the duration of your major cooldowns. One of the things I hated playing a monk tank is how much extra information not in the UI that a healer external to you needs to know about your monk tank to determine if you're actually in trouble. Because of how stagger damage works, because of the state of cooldowns and the various reactive things, it takes a lot of extra UI elements to figure out if a tank, and particularly a Brewmaster tank, is really in trouble and needs help, or if they're going to be able to handle it and you should just let them be efficient with it. And communicating that information can save a lot of extra cooldowns getting used, and also give you good like warnings times to use those cooldowns when there's actually trouble. So one of the things I'd like to do to help with that information is broadcast my major cooldown timers, right? So you'd use RT timer name of the cooldown with the duration of X seconds. So I'd say Fortifying Brew in 15, right? Timer Fortify Brew 15, and then everybody knows that I have Fortifying Brew up because I just hit that in my macro, and it's going to last however many more seconds. They could plan, if I'm getting absolutely smoked, to run their cooldowns on the end of that for better coverage, or just know that I've handled that cooldown and it doesn't need to be handled externally. Raid attendance. This takes a snapshot of who's available that you can save and who's in the raid, and tells you. So I have been at all of the raids that I have been to. Here's a long list of people that I've raided with in the last tier, many of which like in a pug one time, but can be useful for maintaining raid attendance, and there are a bunch of options for it. Castle, you might want to do this instead of taking screenshots all the time. We got some boss statistics which are pretty cool. We got loot history, so you can see a lot of the stuff that I've looted from various transmog runs because I don't have this turned off tracking old raids. And you can see what I've gotten out of some of the Mythic Pluses lately. But this is useful to tell where a piece of loot went, if that's important to you. And so you get in some of our actual raids here. Who pulled is a cool one. This will tell you, and message in chat if you want, who pulled the boss when you're trying to figure out who Ninja pulled. And you can check for the presence of weak auras. So I can take any of my weak auras in here, and I can check who else in the raid has them. And it's going to tell me on this little graph here, based who's all in the raid, who's got that weak aura. So if we have weak auras specifically designed to deal with particular boss mechanics, we're going to know, like Santa Claus from Orwell's Hell in 1984, if you've been participating in that required piece of raid prep or not. And then there's a profile section, like any add-on with this much configuration options, you can save your options. Well, any good add-on with this many configurations options, you can save your options into a profile and import it from character to character. So I know I'm getting boring because we're drawing Pirate Mark Twain. So let's talk about weak auras. And I will try to keep this a little brief because we've been going 45 minutes. And I don't want to take too much time. But weak auras are probably the most powerful tool in World of Warcraft. So when I say weak auras are the most powerful tool in World of Warcraft, I mean they can do pretty much literally anything but play the game for you. And there are probably ways that they can mostly play the game for you too. And for an example of this, this is my Details nickname extender weak aura. This is a weak aura that exists purely to save available that I can stuff into my Details options panel to allow me to put more than 32 characters in my nickname. This serves no purpose in raiding other than letting me put names on other people's detail meter that they might chuckle at. So right now I have Sorrow of House Storm, first of his name, the thrice nerfed, who lectures in Discord the reviewer of logs, king of the tryhards, and the OCD, warden of the range DPS, and rightful heir to the top of the DPS meter that nobody is going to read, but I had fun typing it in there. That is an example of the power of weak auras. This weak aura, by existing, is allowing me to hack the parameters of a totally different add-on. They can do virtually anything if you know how to use them. There are a ton of them out there. I don't know how to use them that well, but I know well enough. So we have our various things: trigger, conditions, actions, animations, load, that allow you to modify weak auras. So if we go down to Luxos Warlock Core, you're going to see the rotational stuff that appears in the center of my screen. So here's my unstable affliction monitor. Here's corruption. So this is checking my target. If we go trigger, nope. Conditions, nope. How is this done?
Is it on combat?
Load. Here we go. Here's what I'm looking for. So I have to be an affliction specialization warlock. This is not in combat, but it's only displaying now because I've got it highlighted. So this is dynamic from first. This is referencing another. So these are somewhat complicated versions. The important thing in display here is if I wanted to change the height of this so it's not 46, ooh, I can make it big and funny looking. Right? I can change the offset position width, so I can make this larger or smaller. It's tied to the corruption debuff, so I could change what debuff this is targeting. What this lets me do, knowing that I have my display and I have, maybe we can find a better example. Dark Soul Misery, conditions. Okay. So you can modify these and you can clone. So if we right click here and we duplicate this, we can make another one. So my process is very rudimentary for making weak aura changes. I will duplicate one that has the functionality I want and change what spell it's targeting at. I will move it around, change the size of it, do little things like that. But you can do little things like that to organize, right? So even have like Covenant ones, Decimating Bolt, Scouring Type. There's all kinds of pre-built ones for various functions. You can choose what you like, and you can get into little tweaks like that that let you really change and customize. So this is one I've customized. It's a trinket monitor for Manifesto of Madness. So I basically just copied these cooldown monitors and put my trinket over there because I have a bad habit of forgetting it. And then I had a worse habit of forgetting it, and it was font, and it was really affecting my DPS. So I shoved a giant one up here that's impossible to miss. It glows when the trinket's off cooldown and you're in combat. And it's tied to this slot, so whatever trinket I put in that slot is going to trigger it. So I'll put my clicky trinket in the bottom slot. And I get this comedically oversized information element up here saying, hey dude, your effing trinket is ready, you better hit it. Because after reviewing my logs for a long time, I found that one of my problems was I left my trinkets off cooldown when I really shouldn't have. So you can solve little problems like that by adjusting weak auras, by making minor changes to where your information elements are set up to direct your attention, which kind of brings, I'm going to turn off this rate cooldown frame because it's bothering me. It kind of brings us full circle, right? So the UI and all the add-ons we're putting together are about how we're organizing our information so that we know the things we need to know when we need to know them, and we do so minimally distracting ourselves from the things we want to watch out for. When I'm in a raid, my attention needs to be focused on the abilities that are going to kill me. It needs to be updating a mental checklist of what comes next in my encounter routine, and how does my reaction to that affect me at this point. It needs to be available so that if something changes about positioning because of how a particular mechanic was handled before, that I can adjust to that. The things that make me a good player, that make me do well in the raids and be an asset to the raid team, all take attention. So the goal is to minimize the amount of attention we have to spend to do our basic stuff. So I have my weak auras down here. I have my damage flow over here. I have my boss mod timers coming up over here and various information elements. I have buffs and debuffs up here. I've big emphasized weak aura over here for my trinkets because I was forgetting that. I did a purge, but if you were to look at my weak auras previously, you would find a whole bunch of weak auras based around encounter mechanics to just emphasize them in a way that makes me react quicker to that without having to spend a lot of attention looking at a particular place other than my character's feet. And putting all that together gives me a good UI. It lets me do what I need to in raid and be a better player. But because I take the time to think about that, because I'm configuring boss mods with that in mind, because I'm building my weak auras around that philosophy, I'm able to get a good UI that works for me, and I'm able to be better. Be a better player for that. And that's kind of what I want to do, instill that all of these elements can be customized. What we want to do is seek the way to transmit that information in a way that lets us be aware and be thinking about the things that are dynamic in a fight rather than thinking about, oh, when's my trinket coming up, rather than spending mental cycles on I need to refresh this dot other than a glance and do that. Being able to do the basic things with a minimal amount of attention. So, to sort of illustrate that point, I'm going to do a little DPS on this dummy. I'm going to do my burst, and then I'm going to do something wrong. And it should be very obvious to people watching what I'm doing, what the thing I've done wrong is. And that's because I have a good set of rotational information placed prominently that's hard to ignore. So when I make the mistake, and you know what it is, call it out as soon as you figure it out.
You're filling with Drain Soul, not using Haunt.
Not using Haunt is the answer. So, how did you figure that out?
It was glowy.
Yep, there's a big glowy button right here that says, hey, you don't have Haunt up. Right? And it shows me the cooldown when I hit Haunt. It shows me the cooldown. It starts glowing before the thing is up when Haunt's cooldown is up. So you see my Haunt ticking down 876. My debuff on the target has a little more time on it because there's a sort of grace period built into Haunt. Boom, we start glowing here. That's my cue to go get that. That's very accessible information, but it's an important part of doing maximum DPS in my rotation. And I don't want to spend my visual time taking my primary view from here, where the raid mechanics come in, or here where my bars are, or here where my trinket monitor or my debuffs are, to go down here to Haunt and say, oh, is that off cooldown? Yeah, I should hit that. So that's why, that's a critical piece of information for my rotation. I want it to be super handy. The glow comes on it at various times to make that visible to me. And that's the idea you want of prioritizing your key information so you can access it easily with low levels of attention. Do you click to activate or use hot buttons for those longer CDs? I keybind everything. I was disappointed, extremely disappointed to learn in Quarion's stream the other night that he clicks a lot of his cooldowns. I have buttons. I have invested in the mouse that I use to have enough buttons to activate all the abilities that are key for raids. Sometimes I struggle if there's a lot of clicky activated things on gear. And I'm playing a super complicated spec like Affliction. Like Affliction is a large number of buttons spec. But I've keybound everything. Since they reverted the GCD changes for a lot of things, and stuff like Dark Glare and Dark Soul Misery are off the global cooldowns, I have a macro, which is tooltip to summon Dark Glare over here. That macro shows the tooltip of summon Dark Glare, but it uses my trinket slot. It casts Misery if I have it talented, and then it casts summon Dark Glare. So it does all my cooldowns that I want to sync in one. I have a separate button for Dark Soul Misery if I want to hit that out of cycle. Why would you click your mounts? I'm Control S, Control W for my mounts. My mounts are keybound. Everything is keybound.
I clicked down.
Disenchant is keybound. You know what's not keybound because I've tanked for a long time? Sit is unbound. Default sit is bound. If you're a tank, unbind that shit. When you sit down, you take critical hits. You don't want to fat finger that by accident. You can palm it, like it's default X, and you can palm it if you're on WASD 1, 2, 3, 4, and sit down and take a critical hit. That I do not have keybound. If you're a tank, unbind that shit. If you're not a tank, probably unbind that shit anyway. Sorry. Tank. I get triggered about little tank habits. Tanking is more sacred than DPS to me, so I have lots of experience for that. So that was kind of the stuff I wanted to go through. But let's take a little bit of time. If anybody's got any questions, they want to dive into more detail on what I've said, they want to share their experiences, now's the time.
I recently made my own weak aura for all of my stuff. I'm pretty sure there's a lot wrong with it, but it's really helped me learn the class of affliction. So if you want to take a look at that, I don't know how to link it, but there's that too. If they want to get a look of a completely customized one.
Yep. And doing customizations like that is actually a great way to learn some of the ins and outs, because you can figure out things about how the spells are implemented in the background by trying to chase down where they are in weak auras that might tell you something you didn't know. But you get things like with Haunt. This weak aura is sort of an extension from understanding that there are important things about Haunt that aren't immediately you don't immediately grok, right? Because Haunt has a cast time, it has a cooldown, and it has a debuff duration and a travel time. So you have to synchronize in your information the fact that you start casting that, it triggers later, it flies to the boss, and then it debuffs them. The thing you're trying to keep up is the debuff on the boss, but you have to react well before that debuff actually falls off to get the uptime you want, right? And then the other thing about the travel time is it enables some openers, right? So when we open with a Haunt build, we open with Haunt, put it in the air, and then cast Unstable Affliction, and we're trying to land those two pretty close together when the pull happens, right? Because we get that cast time, couple seconds of cast time in before the fight actually starts to jumpstart our DPS. That requires you to stand away from the boss, and there's the little fun bit going on in the pre-patch now that the best major for Affliction is Blood of the Enemy, so you have to start with Haunt and Unstable Affliction from far away to get those in, and then you have to run in while you're putting up your instant cast dots to get in range to Blood of the Enemy things. Anybody else? Comments, questions, discussion?
What size monitor are you using? I could imagine the bottom portion taking up a good amount of screen size.
It does, and I believe I'm not using a terribly big monitor. I think I'm using like a 23 inches. Honestly, I've had it for quite a while, so I don't remember. The thing I'm using for the bottom section that I'm glad you brought up, because it's worth pointing out, is Sun Viewport art. So that bottom black section is a viewport. It is not... no, they changed that. No, interface, add-ons, sun art. So this is my bottom panel in Sun. It has a thickness of 18.3. We can adjust that thickness, but what you'll notice about adjusting that thickness is it does not cover the screen. Ooh, my game's locked up. Didn't like me doing that. I probably need... There we go. So it adjusts the visible area, but it does not cover it. So I've taken up this part here, but my viewing area in terms of what I can see in game is the same. I don't have it covered down here. So I've compressed the same visual area in game into a smaller area on screen, which means that I'm not overwriting elements. So that's why I use that. I'm not, like, nothing's happening under this black panel that I can't see. And that's called a viewport add-on, and SunArt is one of them. And there's a few others. I highly recommend those because you preserve, this is 18.3, you preserve your play space while creating UI space for various things down below. And this blank black space down here actually gets filled up with my raid frames when I'm in a raid group. Let me bug, wife's in King's Rest, so she's not really listening too hard.
I'm listening. What do you want?
Pixie, I'm going to pick on you for a second here.
Uh-oh. You're going to pick on Pixie? Okay.
Well, I'm going to use her to help me demonstrate how my raid frames work.
Oh. Also, if you're a healer, they don't work very well. The viewport, anyway.
Sure. I don't heal, so as a point of order, I only make health bars go left. So my setup is not optimized for the healing role at all. It's optimized for DPS, and whatever considerations people with more experience than me in healing want to make, they do that. So this is my 5-man party frame. So this is a shrinking frame. You're going to see it here at the size it is for a 5-man. If I were to get into 10, these frames would shrink and move up here and double up to a second row, and that would expand, getting ever smaller and less detailed but more numerous as we go up in raid size up to 40 players.
Display, right?
That's interesting.
So sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what's important for a healer is that they're pretty much right below your feet. Matter of fact, I had to get rid of my healing weak auras, which healer cooldowns and stuff being what they are, it's really easy to keep track of those things. But instead of having the bars like weak auras like you have, I actually had them attached to my mouse so that I saw those cooldowns come up as I was clicking on my raid frames. And of course, my raid frames are and party frames are right below basically my character's feet.
Yeah. So that's an example of the same kind of optimization we talked about, right? So in a healing role, status of the raid, health totals of the raid, and debuffs is much more critical information to what you're doing than it is in a DPS role. So in my case, to optimize doing damage, I have all my rotational and cooldown information sitting here, whereas Pixie's optimizing her reaction to incoming damage, so her immediate critical information is raid frames. So we're doing the same thing. We've both said directly below my character's feet, that's critical information space. But based on the different role that we're doing, we've put different information in there. Right? Castle's got a good one there too, where his raid frames go. I've seen those set up before in the attendance screenshots. So that's So that's a good example of how you do have to personalize. You do have to do some thinking about what you're doing. But again, the stuff immediately around where your eyes rest is kind of your critical information. And you have to prioritize, right? You have to say, this is the important thing that I need to know at a glance really fast, and this is the thing that I can take a little longer to understand because I have more time for reaction, or it's less critical to my DPS, or it's not as important as triaging who's taking large amounts of damage right now, etc. So yeah, that ties in very nicely, and thank you, Pixie, for elucidating that, because I don't do healing.
You're welcome.
All right, last call before we call it a night at about the 1 hour mark, and everybody can get back to things that less put them to sleep. All right, silence is golden. I'm going to stop recording. Thanks to everybody who was able to come out for participating. I'm going to get this video up on my little YouTube channel and then link it in Discord so everybody can go back and look at it. I promise you, because this was recording off of my computer directly, that you'll have less lag and less resolution issues that I was fiddling with earlier, and probably be able to see things a little more clearly.